everyone. So we're going to talk about 7 habits that I regret at 70. I'm going to be 70 in a few months, so technically not there yet, but I have been taking all these months up until this momentous moment, if that's a phrase, to think about what I might have done differently. I'm a big believer in have no regrets and forget the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. But yet, experience does teach us some things that perhaps from 2020 hindsight makes us evaluate what we could have done differently. So, number one on my list of 7 bad habits is not enough sleep. You know, when I was younger, how many of us said this? I'll sleep when I'm dead. Or, you have to stay up late for this and that. And I could remember, in fact, I'm in touch with some people that I traveled with in a musical group right out of high school. And we would stay up all night talking, just, having these intense conversations because I guess we thought we could change the world. And we were working on a strategy to do that. Of course, this was before computers and social media. And that was our social media, is that we just hung out together and talked and talked. And we slept in till the next morning, but probably didn't get that 7-8 hours that we needed. And so I think if I could have realized how important it is to sleep, and that some people do need more sleep or less sleep than others, and recognizing what that is. And part of that is also understanding what keeps you from sleeping. Now, I think the biggest thing is caffeine, otherwise known as coffee, and tea, and maybe even soda. I did way too much of that when I was younger. So bad eating habits for sure, but I have reformed in my later years. But anything that keeps you from sleeping, exercising at night, even though they say the best time to exercise is when you can exercise. So I also believe that trying to get it in when you can, but most people do a whole lot better exercising in the morning. And if you do it too close to bedtime, you get all this energy and blood flow going, and then you're up late, and that kind of defeats the purpose. If you exercise in the morning, then you have all day to run out of energy, and you sleep like a baby, sleep like a rock at night. So that's number one. Alcohol. So there are these cultures of the world that say, like the Mediterranean diet, or countries in the Mediterranean, namely Greece, that if you drink your red wine, you get resveratrol, which you can get from red grapes. But they say that having a glass with dinner is good. But how many of us can just do one glass of wine? Because what happens is when you drink alcohol, it loosens up the brain, and all of a sudden your inhibitions are out the window, not only for drinking and eating, but other things as well. So, as the Ed Sheeran song goes, bad habits, late night talks, all those kinds of things that happen in bars happen because our inhibitions are out the window. So alcohol, especially for overeating, and for those of us who have had a tendency to do that in our past, just not a good habit. And I have friends now who don't drink at all. Okay, call them teetotalers, whatever you want. But really, they believe that their health throughout their life, and now we've had some years to pile on with our own anecdotal experience, it just, for them, they talk about how much healthier they are and how much better they feel not having had much, if any, alcohol throughout their lives. And when I look back, the times that I drank heavily was when I was a TV reporter in Miami, and all of us would congregate at the El Toro bar. I don't know if it's still open. I don't think it is, off the 79th Causeway in Miami. And we would just commiserate about these incredibly tough stories that we had to cover. And one of the things that I believe is that television reporters in particular have the highest rate of undiagnosed PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, because we had to cover disasters, and unlike the people who were treated either then at the scene or eventually through social workers and psychology for the trauma that they experienced, we as reporters would go from one disaster and trauma to another, all in the course of one day. In Des Moines, I covered 6 stories. In Miami, not so much, but they were intensely rugged stories, and processing them, sometimes we lived alone. And so, our days would be, especially in Miami, were that of just working overtime without getting paid. And that was a whole nother thing we eventually did, but it took decades for that to work out. But we would work 12, 14, 16 hours a day covering stories and just be mentally and physically exhausted and just really not having any time to process what we had experienced. So, alcohol was one way, or, congregating when we could after work was one way we kind of dealt with that pain and experience. 7 unhealthy habits. I think we're up to number 3. Thinking that the pasture is always greener. Part of being an enthusiastic lover of life and wanting to experience adventures of all kinds is thinking that there's more. And sometimes there is, but sometimes love and job satisfaction can be right in your own backyard. And for me, I had some really strong role models in my early childhood, in particular, a couple of uncles and parents who had a marriage that lasted 64 years. So I'm thinking, where do I find this kind of peace and excitement? And it wasn't necessarily about money, because my dad was always about money doesn't buy happiness. And to some extent, it's mostly true. And I've had experiences where I have seen people being bought off, both in my family and beyond. And so money does talk. And that's kind of it never worked for me, but, I kept looking for the smarter, more enthusiastic, lover of life, president of the United States. I don't know what I was looking for, but on the other hand, when I look back, I was also in, as some of us experienced, in some terribly abusive relationships, and I should have gotten out sooner than I did. So there's always going to be somebody who's younger, faster as a runner or in whatever sport or occupation. And sometimes you just have to be excited and happy with what you have right under your nose. Oh, let's see, what else? I think we're now to habit number 4. Reliance on snack bars. Because I have led such an active life, I've always been snack bars since they were created. And I think when I mistakenly did the Atkins diet, they had Atkins bars, and I lived off of those. Those were replaced by Laura bars, and my weight went sky high. I was also on the road constantly, and I can make many excuses as to why my weight went up significantly on a vegan diet, but I was not eating my 5 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And then, of course, the Laura bars were replaced by Clifbars, which I still do to this day. Oh yes, truth be known, let's have out with it here. These chocolate mint bars are amazing. They give me just a little bit of caffeine so that I don't have to drink coffee or tea, and those just don't agree with me so much in my old age. All right, that is number 5, and number 6 would be not listening to my body. You know how much I preach this. This is like, the shoemaker's daughter doesn't get shoes, or preaching to the choir. So I always say, and I especially said this in my book, Vegan Fitness for Mortals, don't get a case of the terrible twos, trying to do too much too soon. If a little bit of running feels good, well, let's do a lot of running. It just can't work that way, especially when you're dealing with injuries that may become chronic. And knowing when that is happening to your body is really tricky, especially as we age, because I don't want to lose the ability, or I don't want to lose running. I don't really want cross training like swimming and other sports to take the place of running. So I have to really be in touch with my body. I do a check-in every morning to make sure that I am feeling okay. Then the final bad habit, unhealthy habits that I regret at 70, not saving money. I came from a very generous family. My dad made money in his business and he worked nonstop. He was a workaholic before it was a word. And I certainly have learned those kinds of things. And, I never do anything half-baked. So just this weekend, 254th 5K or longer age group award since 2006, just on plants. So passionate about what I do, but especially for those less fortunate, I have wanted to be generous, but sometimes you have to know when to say no. And because I've been in some tough situations in my personal life, and you'll see that on social media and YouTube in particular, you have to know how to put things away and save it and don't spend it. Easier said than done. All right, hope that's been helpful. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about from my 70 years on this planet, and most of that being vegan and a runner. And if I can help you in any way, let me know. Drop it down in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Gotta run.